Horn gets it across, splits defenders. And now they just keep it away from Duke. The celebration starts for the NC State fans.
Well, Duke fans, the revenge tour continues. And that was a tough loss last year. 2 tough losses, in fairness, to NC State. And we're 1 for 1. The goal is to be 2 for 2 after Monday night, tomorrow night, against NC State. This game will be at home for the Dukies. Both teams are traveling from not very far away. Duke was at Wake Forest. NC State had a home game against SMU, which they dropped. And so, quick turnarounds, but at least not much travel time for either team.
Yep. Bringing back not so great memories of that very large guy that played on NC State, DJ Burns. I mean, let's face it, the pathway, I don't know how the draw resulted in the pathway to the Final Four going through DJ Burns, but it did. And as that clip at the beginning of our video showed, there was just no getting around him, literally. I mean, there's just, and he had incredible finesse for a big guy. His passing skills, his shooting skills. Because remember, Jack, they finished in the AC. Their overall record was 20-14. They weren't exactly a barn burner team heading to the Final Four. And in conference play, they were 9-11. But they had our number. They just had our number. And Kyle Filipowski and who would have been the other big man? Marky Mark? Or we had a year off. So who was helping him to try to guard DJ Burns?
That was kind of part of the problem. Is Filipowski was our biggest player. We did have Ryan Young, but it was a bad matchup for Ryan Young. The only guy who had some success last year on Duke against Mr. Burns was Sean Stewart, but unfortunately, it was really just that first game, and that was the game Duke won. Right, looking back on it, that was one of the best performances from Sean Stewart last year was in that game against NC State that Duke won. Unfortunately, it was just hard to replicate it against Mr. Burns, who is now playing for the Goyang Sonu Sky. Can't remember.
Sky Gunners.
Sky Gunners.
The Sky Gunners.
The Sky
Korea.
Gunners of Korea. DJ Horn. I think, listen, we're Duke fans, obviously, but that NC State team was fun. It was a fun run.
Yes.
It was, we were rooting against them, but, they were fun to watch. DJ Horn is now playing in Germany. Mohamed Diarra, who is just phenomenal. As much as the credit, went to the 2 DJs, it was like every time you thought you had a defensive stop, Diarra had an offensive rebound or a hustle play or something. He's playing in France, and the last guy who's not on the team this year, who's an important player last year for NC State, Casey Morcell, you can look him up on LinkedIn. He's now a commercial real estate agent. He's trying to he's in the beginning of his broadcasting career. He said Grant Hill and Debbie Antonelli were a couple people. I know you love Debbie Antonelli. Were a couple people who were really helpful for him. He said he talked to a lot of people during NC State's run last year. So, good for the 4 of them. They had an awesome run last year. And that's about the end of the positives I think I have for NC State because – go ahead.
No, I just want to say goodbye.
Yeah, goodbye. It's enough. Right? It was fun to watch DJ Burns. It was hard to root against him, but I want Duke to win. It's time to win, and it's a totally different NC State team. Yes, there are a few players who returned Michael O'Connell, Ben Millbrooks,
Oh
who
God, another one who after we thought we stopped DJ Burns, he was another one that just sometimes Middlebrooks got in the way. Big enough, did something.
I
Bad memory.
right. And the thing about Middlebrooks, I agree with you. It's like he's one of those guys who I'm saying this in the most positive way. Like he's one of those guys who, when you're rooting against him, how annoying is Middlebrooks? Like he's just right. But if he was on your team, you would love him because he just has this. He plays with intensity, especially defensively. He makes a lot of winning plays. He's not much of a scorer, but you'd like him on your team. Jaden Taylor is back. He's one of their 2 leading scorers this year, and Dennis Parker as well as a good defensive wing off the bench. So those are their 4 returners from last year's Final Four run for NC State.
Final Four.
It's so crazy because to your point, they were 17 and 14, and then won 9 straight. What a run. What a run for Coach Keats. And it was a really timely run because there were some rumblings about, his future at the NC State program. And then they got hot, and it was an awesome run. Unfortunately, I think it's time to turn the page because this year, last year didn't look like they were going to do it, so I guess you never know. But they are 9-10 at this point. They are 2-6 in conference play so far. Now, 5 of those 6 losses have been by less than 10 points, and a few of them have been by 2 or 3 points. So you could, the ball goes another way. It could be, that they are 3-5 or maybe even 4-4 in conference play. But at the same time, one of their wins was a 1-point win. So I think they're probably fairly situated at 2-6. It's been a bit of an interesting year for them. One of the guys they brought in from the transfer portal, Mike James, who averaged double figures and 5 rebounds at Louisville last season. I know Louisville wasn't good, but still double figures. Has not played at all this year. And from what I was able to read, he had like an injury that was supposed to be a few weeks. And now it's been several months. And then they thought he was going to be back. He got sick. It's a number of things have happened. And so I don't think he will play for NC State, but I guess you never know.
Look, I thought it was going to be a close game at Wake Forest. They always challenge us, and so last night's game was closer than I wanted. But then Duke's poise, the opportunity to actually play in a close game and win it, is very, very helpful for Coach Shire's ability to teach. But I had it as a 5-point win, and it was a 7-point win. Tomorrow night, we're going to win by 30. It's going to be a punishing win because, first of all, it's part of the North Carolina Revenge Tour. So we got off to a win, a little shaky, but the first half holding Wake Forest to 22 points. This tomorrow night at home, 30-point win. And we'll get into why and who and all of that a little bit later. But
Good.
This is going to be late.
Before we bury NC State, let's just at least go through their roster, talk a little bit about Duke, and then you can explain why you think this is going to be a Duke beatdown over NC State. Because I'm on a similar page as you as far as that's concerned. Now, this year's NC State team has been led by Marcus Hill, a transfer from Bowling Green, and Jaden Taylor. Those are their two leading scorers at about 13 points per game. Both guys kind of more Hill than Taylor, but both guys like to shoot the mid-range shot. Taylor is their highest volume three-point shooter at 4.5 attempts per game. He only connects on about 34% of those shots. The third consistent starter for them has been Dontrez Styles, starting at the power forward spot, averaging 9 points, 4 rebounds, and a block. He's about 6'6". Taylor and Hill are 6'4" apiece. Interesting note about Styles. He started his career at North Carolina, went to Georgetown for a year, and now is at NC State. So at least, there's Aiden Holloway, who went directly from Auburn to Alabama. At least there was a stop in between going from North Carolina to North Carolina State. Michael O'Connell, he, along with Jaden Taylor back from last year's team, he hit the biggest shot on NC State's run because without his three in the ACC tournament, none of that ends up happening. So he's back. He's their leading assist man at 3.5 per game. He's not shooting the ball great this year at 31% from three. He's listed at 6'2". And Ben Millbrooks has been the man in the middle for them this year. A little bit surprising to me that Brandon Huntley Hatfield hasn't emerged as the starter. I thought he would, but Millbrooks has just outplayed him at 6'10", 240. His offense has been better this year, 9 points per game, 4.5 rebounds, over a steal per game, and he's leading the ACC at 1.7 blocks per game. He even had a nice jab step mid-range shot against SMU yesterday, which was pretty impressive. I didn't know he had that in his bag. Off the bench, the aforementioned Brandon Huntley Hatfield, those two are listed at the same 6'10", 240. That's their center pairing. They have mixed in a few moments where they've played them together. I'm curious if they'll try that against Duke. I don't think so, but that is an option for Coach Keats, who's now in his 8th season at the helm for NC State, which is crazy to me because, quick aside, I remember Coach Keats when I was at Northeastern and working in the athletic department there, because he was the coach for UNC Wilmington. And he spent 3 years there. He brought them to the NCAA tournament a few times. They actually ended up playing against Duke, I believe, one of those times. And Duke won, but it's just remarkable. He's been there for 8 years now. It says to me I'm getting old. With that being said, finishing out the rest of the rotation, Breon Pass, 6 foot, guard off the bench. He's their best shooter. He doesn't play very much, but he does connect on 47% of his threes. Dennis Parker Jr. is a 6'6", 200-pound wing who's a good defensive playmaker, can generate some steals and blocks in limited minutes. And this was a guy who I really didn't think I was going to have in the breakdown here, but Paul McNeil, ESPN Top 100 recruit freshman, just had his best game of his young college career. He had 8 points, 3 assists, and a steal. He didn't shoot the ball very well. He was 1 for 5 from the floor, but was impactful in those minutes. So I do expect to see him get a little bit more playing time than I had thought tomorrow night against Duke.
So I'm going to use a graphic for what I think is going to happen tomorrow night against NC State. Because of the way the game flowed in Wake Forest, whereby Duke had them on the ropes at the end of the first half, having allowed only 22 points, and thoroughly just an incredible effort. I don't want to be in the video room when Coach Shire says, how many halves are there in a basketball game? And that first 10 minutes, he is going to just say, you have got to play at that intensity for 40 minutes. Yes, you had an amazing half, and then you guys wound up down by 6, which, by the way, we did get to within a whisker of being the number one ranked team in the country. Tennessee played Auburn yesterday. Tennessee's ranked 6th. Auburn's ranked 1. 4 minutes to go. Tennessee had the lead in a very physical game. The game was in the low 50s, I think, at the end. Maybe
neither
50,
team
49.
shot above like 33% from the field.
It was unbelievable. And so, but then Auburn, showing how tough and out they are, managed to hang on, even though Tennessee had opportunities. So they got their win. They will continue to be ranked 1 unless they played earlier in the week, and I just don't remember. But they'll be 1, we'll be 2. So in any case, Shire is going in there. And so here's what I'm looking for, Jack. I just expect an offensive explosion. After that second half, I expect the ball to be rotating around and three-pointers shooting a much better percentage from three-point range. Second thing will be Gillis's minutes will continue to rise. And Foster, we're now 10 games into the ACC season. The rotation is being cemented. And I kind of see that when Malik Brown comes back, it's the ability to put, certainly Gillis in, Malik Brown in, and then Gangba and
Evans?
at Quick Draw. And Foster, unless he begins to show us something. That's the second thing. Third thing is valuable minutes from Patrick Gamba. It's partially because as much as I would love to see Kaman Malowich be able to play 30, 35 minutes, he just doesn't seem to be able to do that and stay out of foul trouble. So that Gamba is definitely going to get minutes. And as you pointed out in our post-game show, Gamba actually is in his way showing a learning curve and getting back to the player that he was that Duke recruited. And
just quickly, for those who may not know, Gangba missed the majority of his senior season in high school. So he had I think it was a knee injury, definitely a leg injury, confident in that. And so it's been, the coaching staff actually kind of intentionally was trying to let him come along slowly. So I think the Brown injury may have forced their hand a little bit there. But his performance against Wake Forest was great. And so it was really good to see him play as well as he did.
Well, and so I expect him to continue. Maybe it's 6 points. Maybe it's 4 rebounds. Maybe it is he had a block and a steal in the Wake Forest game. So maybe his presence he's loosening up a bit. He's getting his sea legs for the court, and he is absolutely, boy, what a luxury. What a luxury for Malik Brown to go down. Yes, we'll see him at the Illinois game. To go down and have Patrick Gamba to come in. But that's kind of what I'm looking for. And that other guy who I sometimes just don't mention, Cooper Flagg. It is, you just run out of superlatives. The coach of Wake Forest at the end of the game said he didn't have enough words. He was comparing him to Kevin Durant. He was comparing there wasn't much he couldn't say that wasn't not just positive, that was just off the charts about this is a once in a generational player. So I don't often point him out, not because I'm overlooking him. It's just because I sit back and I just kind of watch.
Well, it's funny you say that because I've noticed that's a trend for us. Is I feel like we talk about Cooper Flagg less than the majority of other people who talk about Duke and just Cooper in general. And I think the reason is because we know that our audience, like a lot of it is where you can see it. There's not much to say. It's every time you see it, we all know what we're watching. I think we're on the same page. To Coach Forbes' point, it is generational, and this wasn't a slight on Mr. Filipowski, but he made a comment about how, last year Duke's leading scorer was the first pick in the second round. This year, Duke's leading scorer is going to be the first pick of the first round, and there is a big difference. And Cooper Flagg, I mean, I think we should talk about him more than we do.
Let's do that. I mean, so if you were, other than, we did last night when you ran through his stats and you said 25 points or so. He had 7 rebounds, 6 assists, somewhere in that neighborhood, more or less. And that the only thing we could find wrong were the turnovers. And it's a very interesting thing that he had 7 turnovers. And I still say that's coming on the heels of either last game or the game before when he had 6 turnovers.
And he had a bunch against Miami. And I don't think he was great in that department against Boston College either.
Right. And so let's stay there since it's pretty hard to pick apart his game. Is it a function of him doing too much, which they're really kind of at times saying, okay, give the ball to Cooper and just do something amazing. Or last night you said some were forced, some were unforced turnovers. Because sometimes he does something so amazing and he's looking to pass and no one else is ready for that amazing thing and he throws the ball away. But it's not because he turned it over. It was because no one was ready to say, wait, I got it. I'm the receiver of this. And they just blew it. So.
I guess a few points on that. Number one, Coach Forbes, going back to Coach Forbes, mentioned how their game plan, especially in the second half, was to limit Cooper's ability to set up his teammates. And they wanted him to have to score more often. And the reason, part of the reason I'm bringing that up is to kind of reinforce, you had said, we didn't get any lobs to Malawach. And I think that comment from Forbes is kind of one of the reasons why that wasn't available, is because Wake Forest their mission was to take that away and make Cooper, instead of allowing him to make his teammates better, make him be a scorer, I think was more or less their game plan. Cooper, the other thing I think that's important to note as to how I viewed the game from Mr. Flagg. He had 7 turnovers. We know that. 5 of those were in the first half, and only 2 were in the second half, which I think is important because the first half, Duke was kind of handily up, right? They're up. They finished up 13, and so I think it's easier to look past those because of the fact Duke scored 35 points. The offense was limited, certainly in the first 10 minutes or so, but they still finished with 35 points. It's not a terrible offensive half, and he only had 2 in the second. To your point from the post game, there were a couple that certainly came off the spin. There was one time in the second half where he tried to find Gangba inside, and it wasn't a good pass. The intention was there, and I think more than anything, it's part of the reason the turnovers are up as of late is I think also as of late, the Duke offense has just been Sion dribble the ball up. Where's Cooper? All right, Cooper, make something happen. And it's interesting. I know, especially early on in the season, you were wanting more from Coach Shire in terms of how the offense was structured. And we're not quite there yet, but I was listening to Theo Pinson on his podcast, the North Carolina player. He was talking about how Coach Williams, he was talking about the North Carolina struggles. And bear with me, this is going to make sense in just a second. And he said, Coach Williams, Roy Williams to be clear, he said the number one offense that Coach Williams had them run at North Carolina was this, which is freelance, for those who may not know. That was the number one offense that they ran. And clearly, Coach Shire, that's pretty much what Duke runs. In the second half against Wake Forest, he was orchestrating a lot more than he typically does. But I think it's part of an adjustment that Duke is making right now in terms of Cooper. In the beginning of the year, there was a lot more with Foster or Knipple setting up the offense. But as we've gotten a little bit further into ACC play, it's been 60, 70% of the time, it's Cooper who's initiating the offense. And I think that adjustment takes time. Because if you remember, kind of going back to the Kansas game, a lot of Khan, he didn't score well, but he had 8 assists. And a lot of those were Cooper setting the screen, and then there was a short roll and he was able to score. But now it's Cooper and someone else setting the screen for him. And so I think it's just an adjustment that he's got to make. And the one thing that I think we've learned about Cooper Flagg is you don't doubt anything from him basketball-wise. If he's not doing it well right now, he will be. It's just a matter of time.
Well, I think very early on, my concern for Duke was the lack of a true point guard. I had my questions about Caleb Foster from the very beginning. And then the chorus joined in, and sure enough, Sion James became the starter at the point guard with the role to get the ball up. But really, I hark back to the Larry Bird days to say that Cooper Flagg is a point forward. And the idea is just to get him the ball and then let him run the offense. And as far as my critique of Duke not having set plays and set offense, where were we in terms of KenPom for overall offense and overall defense?
Right now?
Well, I don't know if you have it after last night, but let's say the game before. We were?
Third in offense, second in defense.
Okay. So
we slid a little bit in offense. The defense is probably the same, but in offense, we may be out of the top 5.
Right. So it's really hard for me to make the argument that the offense isn't working if you're the number 3 offense in the country. So, and after tomorrow night,
yeah, we are now 6th in offense. We slid just outside the top 5. And we somehow moved to 3rd in defense. I think that is more to do with Tennessee and Tennessee gave, even though they lost, they gave up 50 points. So
that was a heavyweight fight. I mean, most games in the SEC are just, it's like every night. It's like, oh God. And who did Kentucky?
They lost to Vanderbilt.
I've been who's unranked.
They're unranked. They've now picked up a couple of good wins. They beat Tennessee. They beat Kentucky. But I have been somewhat consistent in the fact that I think Kentucky was a little bit overrated early on. I think they're a good team, but I didn't buy them as a top 10 team. And I still think I would love to see that Kentucky team at some point again. I think it goes very differently if Duke plays Kentucky for a second time. But putting that to the side, focusing on NC State right now, this is a really bad shooting team. In some ways, there are some similarities with Wake Forest. I just think in all those ways, just NC State is just worse. Like, they're a decent defensive team. Wake Forest is much better. Both teams aren't good shooting teams. The one thing NC State does pretty well is they don't turn the ball over very often, but they also don't shoot the ball well at all. So, those are kind of turnovers, I guess. And the other thing that they do well, but again, not as well as Wake Forest, is they do generate turnovers on the defensive end. So I think that's actually a good thing, that Duke gets that a similar test, but maybe not the same level in terms of it's really two guys. It's Ken Knipple and Ken Flagg manage the turnovers better against NC State, and at home against a team that, again, is a good defensive team, above average defensive team, I think is more fair to say. I think it'll just be much better. Before you get into, the reasons for the beatdown, I just want to go through a couple of guys on the Duke team. Because we talked about Flagg for a bit. I think Khan, he had like a mixed bag bounce back game from Boston College. He did have 15 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, which is great, like great counting numbers. But the second half for me was just not. He didn't look steady. He didn't have poise. Like the rest of the team, I thought did good in that department. He did have a late bucket, which was important. But outside of that, I felt like his second half performance left something to be desired. And I'm being critical of Khan because I think we know he can be better. So it's coming out of a good place. Proctor, I think to your point on the offensive explosion, I'm expecting Proctor to knock down 4 threes in this game. He got a ton of good looks against Wake Forest. They just didn't go in. His defensive assignment won't be nearly as difficult. I think he's going to knock down 4 threes. And I think Sion James is going to give us a better offensive performance and continue to be the steady guard that he's been since he's been, on the Duke team, quite frankly. I think Malawach will give us better minutes. NC State struggled against Samet Igitoglu, he just had his way against the North Carolina State centers. But, Malawach's game isn't the same as Igitoglu. He is a little bit more limited. Igitoglu can score in the post much better. But I do think there will be more opportunities for Malawach to get buckets around the rim. Gillis, as you mentioned earlier, I do think will continue to play well. I don't think he'll score in double figures again, but I think he'll knock down a 3 or 2 and just continue to just steady game. And I think this is a good opportunity for Isaiah Evans to get more minutes. I still think he should be playing more. Last game against Wake Forest, he only played 4 minutes. So I understand, there was a spot where you felt like he could have got a shot up, but I think it's hard to be critical at all, really, when somebody only plays 4 minutes. You don't even get a chance to get a rhythm. I know, as you've dubbed him, he is quick draw, but I think he needs a little bit more time to be able to be effective in his role as a spark plug off the bench. So I think that's everybody.
All right. Okay, so my closing words. Duke will plant the flag in their beatdown of NC State. This is going to be Duke's 10th in a row in their effort to run the table. It is a statement game to be able to deliver this against NC State after NC State eliminated us in the tournament. And it is going to be the definition of not in our house. Final score, 85-55.
Okay. Score predictions, drop them in the comments. I'm going to say I think NC State they can slow the pace down. That is one thing that they can do. So I'm going to say 78-58. 78-58.
Okay. You got a 20-point spread. I got a 30-point spread. Beat down. It's coming. Statement game.
The one thing I'm very curious about is what's the betting spread going to be tomorrow, because Duke was a 10-point favorite on the road at Wake Forest. I think it will be above 20 points. That's my guess. So let us know what you guys think in the comments below. Please like this video. It helps us grow. Subscribe to the channel so you can be on the journey with us and this Duke team as they continue to march on and look for a historic run in the ACC this season. Share it with your friends, and we are available on podcasts. If you can't watch it on YouTube, you can listen to us on the car on your way to work. So with that, we will see you guys after the game tomorrow night, somewhere around 10:30 Eastern Time. Peace.